must pursue efficiency at all levels in its joint operations. We ensure that every operations, every activities shall yield results. Guided by our joint operating concept, the major services shall continue developing the capabilities necessary to act in close cooperation, pursuing the vision of a military that coordinates and maneuvers together across the land, sea, and air. Interoperability is key in stamping out the communist insurgency and in safeguarding our country from all forms of national security threats. Our maritime security objectives will involve more than enforcing the rule of law in our territorial waters. These objectives will also require control of our airspace and the long-range capability of our land forces. Let us continue reinforcing our strengths as a united force. To all our commanders, operational efficiency yields better results when we lead from the front, where we can see the battlefield and our presence is felt by our troops. On the optimal use of resources, the AFP must optimize the use of resources in accomplishing the mission of our force. We have allocated resources and we must utilize this properly, based on the intended purpose and initiatives of the AFP. Thus, we must pursue resource optimization, which will pave the way towards developing our capabilities against the challenges to our national security. On advancing professionalism and meritocracy in the AFP, we must live up to our reputation as a reliable and credible force of the Filipino people. We must perform our mandated tasks as professional, disciplined, and competent soldiers, airmen, sailors, and marines of our armed forces. In doing so, we must uphold our core values of honor, patriotism, and service, our values that will help us strive, win our battles, and prevail over the enemy. Thus, we must select the best personnel to maintain a culture of discipline and meritocracy. On capability development, the preparedness of our personnel, equipment, and sustainment for joint operations dictates how effectively the AFP will perform our constitutional mandate. Hence, we must continue to develop capabilities in preparation for both internal and external threats. We must also continue to pursue an efficient and effective joint logistics and support system and establish robust and secured joint command and control and communications capabilities. Increasing coordination through joint operations allows our AFP to bring our full force to bear against the last remnants of the communist insurgency. There will be no place for them to hide if land, sea, and air are all dominated by our forces. Individually, these efforts are reflected in the top-of-the-line equipment recently procured by the major services, such as the Philippine Navy's new frigates, the Army's new 155mm howitzers, and the Philippine Air Force Black Hawk helicopters, among others. Furthermore, we will continue developing our human resources alongside our material by improving our education and training institutions as well as our health services. Moreover, we shall continue to optimize the utilization of the AFP's real estate assets by partnering with government agencies and private sectors. Improving strategic basing is fundamental to successful force projection. These trusts shall guide us in accomplishing the more urgent tasks set for us. Our Commander-in-Chief has entrusted to us a crucial responsibility to end the local armed conflict before his term ends, and that is on 30 June of 2022. Let us all be mindful to accomplish this task before the deadline. We have gained much in our operational campaigns to address the threat groups. Thus, we must unleash our full force for the final blow that will ultimately destroy and defeat the enemies of the state. Fulfilling this mandate shall pave the way towards a more stable security environment for sustained development. And coupled with the all-out support of the government and the trust of the Filipino people, our convergence will bring a definite end to the communist insurgency. To the remaining insurgents and terrorist groups in the country, let me emphasize that the national government is sincere and open to those who still want to return to the folds of the law. But if you insist, the full force of the AFP will hit you hard, to the brink of your extinction. Beyond the insurgency, there's also the task of safeguarding the upcoming elections, which are always a turning point for the country. It is the AFP's duty to ensure that the will of the people is carried out. Let us all support the national government to ensure a fair, honest, peaceful, and secure national elections. As for matters of territorial defense, our actions must be in full support of the national government's efforts to assert our sovereignty. These challenging times provide opportunities for us to build and strengthen our security and diplomatic ties with our Southeast Asian neighbors and with the rest of the world. We have much to gain from engaging and collaborating with our partners. Meanwhile, we still live each day under the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. At the onset, we have mobilized our resources to supplement the national government's pandemic response efforts. And to this day, we will continue to implement and observe health protocols. We have learned much from this situation and identified gaps in our capabilities, which will add to our readiness to face future similar circumstances. In the meantime, the AFP commits itself to help the nation recover from the impacts of the pandemic. As I assume the leadership of the more than 150,000 strong armed forces of the Philippines, I enjoin everyone to maintain our momentum, sustain our gains, and remain victorious. Let us remember that the enemy is on the brink of irreversible defeat. Let us not forgo this opportunity. This is our main responsibility, and there is no one in a better position to do this but the armed forces of the Philippines. We count on our peace and nation-building partners to work with us in accomplishing our mission of protecting the people and securing the state. We can and we will win, for we both, the AFP and the Filipino people, are traversing the attainable path towards inevitable victory. In doing so, let us all maintain excellence amidst the challenges and instill among ourselves the culture of discipline as professional and competent soldiers, airmen, sailors, and marines of the Filipino nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our timeline set in our campaign. Thus, we must focus on our main task and double time on our efforts. To the men and women of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, this is your 57th Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Andres Castor Centino, ready to lead, ready to serve. Mabuhay ang sandatahang lakas ng Pilipinas, mabuhay po ang Republika ng Pilipinas. Daghang salamat sa inyong tanan. May the Almighty bless our AFP, the Filipino people, and our beloved nation. Maraming salamat.
Thank you to the new Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Andres C. Centino, Philippine Army.
We shall proceed with the retirement ceremony of General Jose Kalingasan Faustino, Jr. We would like to request General Faustino, sir, to stand and step forward as the retirement order is read by the Adjutant General, Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Republic of the Philippines, Department of National Defense, General Headquarters, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Camp General Emilio Aguinaldo, Quezon City. General Orders Number 1157, published on 06 August 2021. Compulsory retirement, pursuant to Sections 5A and 17 of Presidential Decree Number 1638 as amended, and in consonance with Presidential Administrative Order Number 150, dated 04 January 1990. General Jose Kalingasan Faustino, Jr., Officer DAS 9887, Philippine Army, having completed 37 years and 8 months of active military service in the Armed Forces of the Philippines from 01 April 1983 and from 12 March 1988 to 11 November 2021, is compulsorily retired in the rank of General with retirement pay based on the salary grade of general, with FIP longevity pay, effective 12 November 2021. By order of the Secretary of National Defense, Official Jose C. Faustino Jr., General, Philippine Army Chief of Staff. Signed, Maxima O. Ignacio, Brigadier General, Philippine Air Force, the Adjutant General.
Please remain in front, sir, as plaques and mementos will be presented. May we also ask Mrs. Joy B. Faustino, ma'am, to please join our honoree.
The new Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Andres Centino, is requested for the presentation of the plaques and mementos to be assisted by the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel, J1. In grateful acknowledgement of his eminently meritorious and valuable service rendered as Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, from 31 July 2021 to 12 November 2021. Command plaque is hereby presented to General Jose C. Faustino Jr., Officer -9887, Philippine Army. In recognition of his 37 years and 8 months of faithful and honorable service to the Armed Forces of the Philippines, from 01 April 1983 and from 12 March 1988 to 11 November 2021, plaque of honorable service is presented to General Jose C. Faustino Jr., O-9887, Philippine Army. Framed medals will be presented. The framed medals, this contains all the awards or honor he has been conferred with during his active tour of duty.
The pagpupugay sa Kawal Pilipino plaque is presented to General Jose C. Faustino Jr.
Well, this time, the spouse of our honoree, Mrs. Joy Faustino, will be presented with a plaque of appreciation. In grateful appreciation of her unselfish, faithful, and devoted support to her husband's lasting contribution and dedicated service to the Armed Forces of the Philippines and to our nation, plaque of appreciation is presented to Ms. Joy B. Faustino. Well, thank you to the new Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines. This time, we'd like to request Undersecretary Cesar Villano for the presentation of the encased Philippine flag to our honoree. Please all stand as you witness the presentation of the Philippine flag. The Philippine flag symbolizes the aspirations and sentiments of the Filipino people. It embodies love of country and patriotism. For the men and women of the noble profession of arms, it means defending our freedom to the extent of paying the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you very much, Undersecretary Villano. Please all be seated. And once again, congratulations to General Jose Calingasan Faustino Jr. and to Mrs. Joy Faustino. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now hear the valedictory address of the immediate past Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, the 56th Chief of Staff, General Joseph Calingasan Faustino Jr.
Sir. To our presiding officer, sir, if I will be allowed to remove my mask. Thank you very much, sir. To Undersecretary Cesar Badongiano, our presiding officer, officer in charge, Department of National Defense, Lieutenant General Andres Castor Centino, the newly installed Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, with wife Sheila. Of course, let me greet outright my family, my wife Joy, and my unika iha, Christine. Please stand up. Thank you. My parents, Colonel Jose Faustino Sr., retired, Philippine Army. And my mom, Mrs. Euphorcina Sinen Faustino. Thank you. I would like to especially acknowledge my siblings, the eldest, Joy, please, Judith, James, and wife, Tess, Jonathan, and wife, of course, Jigs, and wife, Honey. Of course, yung aking mga pamangkin, Renren, Kay, and her husband, and of course, James. Thank you for coming. I would also like to acknowledge, of course, the Secretary of our National Security Advisor, Secretary Hermeones Esperancer, former Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, one of my mentors, Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., the Presidential Advisor on Peace, Reconciliation and Unity, and of course the vaccine jar. We have the Presidential Advisor on Military Affairs, Yusek Arthur Tabaquero, sir. Other officials from the Department of National Defense officials. We have my mentor, the former CGPA and the former Vice Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. I was his executive assistant, Undersecretary Reynaldo Mapagu, and lovely wife, Ma'am Tess. We have Yusek Ricardo Halad, the Administrator, Office of Civil Defense. Sir, of course, hindi ko pwedeng kalimutan, the Director Dina Ana Lee Cartuano. Inuna ko na siya, the wife of the Superintendent, Office of Human Resource. I would also like to acknowledge the former Chief of Staff, Ambassador Alexander Llano. Sir, thank you very much, sir. My former boss, General Victor Ibrado, from ISG days. Sir, thank you. Of course, a very good mentor also, General Benjamin Madrigal Jr., Administrator of the Philippine Coconut Authority. Allow me, sir, to collectively greet all the others, but allow me to especially mention the Major Service Commanders, Vice Admiral Adiluis Bordado, the FOIC Philippine Navy, lovely wife Ruth. We have from the Philippine Air Force, Major General Connor Anthony Canlas Sr., the acting CGPAF. May I request all the unified commanders present, hindi ko na po kayo isayin, you were acknowledged, to please stand up and be recognized. Thank you very much. We have the Inspector General of the Philippine Army, a very good class, very snappy classmate of ours, Lieutenant General Franco Nemesio Gacal, the Superintendent of the Philippine Military Academy, Lieutenant General Ferdinand Cartojano, and lovely daughters, please stand up. Thank you very much. We have, may I request the members of the Foreign Armed Forces Attaches to please stand up to be recognized. Thank you for coming and attending this occasion. My personal guests, ito yung pinakamatanda kong mentor. Ever since I was 10 years old, I think. 10 years old, he guided me up to now. Every day, pina-follow up niya ako. A former Korean War veteran, a Vietnam War veteran, and the former division commander of the 5th Infantry Division, or the 5th Brigade Separate, 5th Infantry Division. Brigadier General Benjamin Santos. Sir, thank you very much. Kasama niya si Colonel Gracilia. My personal guests, we have Governor Teng Magundadato from Sultan Kudarat, at the Governor of Maguindanao, Ma'am, by Miriam Magundadato, and members of their staff, Sina Ma'am Tina and all the other members of the staff. I would also like to greet my very good friend from Davao, Mr. Toto Albano. Thank you very much, To. My host family in Davao, Mrs. Bing de los Reyes and Mr. Boy de los Reyes. I would like to acknowledge si Ma'am Sol Manangkil, asawa ni Sir Jess. Siyempre, kasama natin si Sir Ayi Hernandez. Sir Ayi, the rock star of Cagayan de Oro. Si Ma'am Jocelyn Bautista. Si Sir Alex Ulidum. We have si Ma'am, si Ate Bebot Marfori, but I think she was able to make it. I would like to acknowledge my friends from Sulu, Engineer Abdul Munir Hadjirul. Thank you. Also Engineer Reggie Santiago. We have si Ma'am Venus Apas. Please stand up, Ma'am Venus. We have si Ma'am Bebot Santos. Please stand up, Ate Bebot. Also, we have Araceli Ayuste, Cicely, tourism officer ng Davao yan. We have Edna Disipulo. Hi, Edna. We have Maria Eliana Pilar Vega and Bernard Plaza. Please stand up. Thank you. Nanggaling pa po sila sa Mindanao. Umattend lang dito. I would also like to greet, of course, may I request the members of the Philippine Military Academy class of 1988, the Maringals and their ladies, pati yung ating Sabahang W8. Please stand up to be recognized. Maraming salamat sa ating mga ladies. Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Mga mista, thank you. General Binloa, nakabarong na. General Diñoso. Sa ating mga retired members. Members and representatives of the Joint Personnel and Special Staff, commanders, chiefs of AFP Wide Support and Separate Units, the Philippine Army Major Unit Commanders present, the delegation from the Headquarters Philippine Army. Please stand up. Mga nakasama ko po sila when I was the Acting Commanding General of the Philippine Army, headed by Major General Bob Capulog, the Chief of Staff. Thank you very much. Officers and enlisted personnel from the Philippine Army, Philippine Navy, and the Philippine Air Force present via VTC. I would also like to acknowledge some of my friends watching sa VTC. We have Governor Tyrone Uy, Governor Edwin Jubahib, Governor Dayang Hirang, Nelson Dayang Hirang, Governor Claudio Bautista, and we have Congressman Roel Gonzaga, and all the others, our friends, our politician friends from Davao City. To the AFP Sergeant Major, distinguished guests present here and via VTC, ladies and gentlemen, magandang hapon sa ating lahat. Yes, sir. As a young man, brought up by a father who is a military officer, dedicated his life for the service, whom I've always looked up to, I have always known that I want to dedicate my life to the service of my country and people. In the course of realizing my potential as a dutiful citizen, I chose to answer the call to serve under the noble profession of arms, because for me, the greatest of duties that a citizen can render to his country is to safeguard its freedom and protect its sovereignty. I started my journey in the military service more than 3 decades ago. I have had my share of frustrations, uncertainties, tribulations, and victories, and in all these years, I have learned that most important lesson that served as one of my guides as I reached the highest point in the armed forces of the Philippines, that is, to lead is to serve. Today marks the culmination of my 37 years of faithful and dedicated service to our flag. 37 long years filled with trials and obstacles, yet absolutely rewarding and fulfilling. After all, not every citizen is given the privilege to serve our country by defending its freedom and protecting its sovereignty from the front lines. Truly, it is difficult to say goodbye to the institution that sheltered me and comforted me and gave me my own domain of leadership. On the day that I was gifted the opportunity to lead the armed forces of the Philippines, I felt the enormity of the responsibility and the weight of the trust and confidence entrusted to me, not only by our Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of National Defense, but also the entire Filipino people. In order for me to successfully perform the duties and responsibilities entrusted to me, I would have to lay down the priorities for the AFP with me at the helm. Through my command guidance, during my assumption, this guidance or these guidelines would serve as the basis upon which our AFP unit commanders and troops would anchor their respective strategies and approaches as they perform their respective mandated missions. Before I continue, allow me to please respectfully greet the family of Lieutenant General Centino. Maraming salamat po sa inyo. In line with that, it is with immense pride and honor I present to you, sir, my tour of duty report. Here. Ito lang muna. Sir? Thank you. So what I have done in 3 months, yun ang lagi nilang sinasabi. Masyadong maiksi ang stint ng ano. That's why when I gave my guidance, when I assumed, it is attainable within 3 months. And as I have always said, the systems are in place. The AFP is like a well-oiled machine that kahit sinong ilagay mo dyan, it will move forward. Upon my assumption of command as the 56th Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, I have set our organization sights to intensify our external and internal defense operations, organizational efficiency, personal development and well-being, and stakeholders' collaboration as we confront a myriad of challenges in a highly volatile and ever-changing domestic and international security environment. With our advanced and modern military capabilities, enhancing our core competencies, and strengthening our stakeholders' collaboration, achieving lasting peace and sustainable development is certainly within our reach. During my watch on external defense operations, the Philippine Air Force and Philippine Navy focused primarily on conducting maritime patrol missions and aerial photo reconnaissance over the Kalayaan Island Group, disputed islets, reefs, and shoals in the West Philippine Sea, where heightened activities by other claimant countries were monitored. With the use of the upgraded cybersecurity assets, surveillance and reconnaissance service of our littoral monitoring stations, detachments, and tethered aerostat radar system, a total of 15,000 or more than 15,000 foreign and domestic transiting vessels within the area of coverage were monitored and were accordingly acted upon by our maritime vessels. In order to further establish and strengthen the external defense plans and programs, the AFP has submitted a position paper on the proposed new Philippine baselines law to the National Task Force West Philippine Sea Secretariat, headed by our very own National Security Advisor, Secretary Esperon. The NTF-WPS orchestrates national efforts to achieve unified action in addressing issues relative to the West Philippine Sea. In addition, the Unilateral Defense Plan Aguila workshop was conducted to finalize the course of action development process, which outlines the Philippines' defense strategy against external armed threat, even without any aid from allies. On cybersecurity defense operations, the AFP monitored and neutralized a total of more than 50,000 hits and attacks on AFP networks, provided protection and conducted countermeasures to mitigate the network, detected more than 35,000 spam hits, and published a total of 49 cyber bulletins to provide our units awareness and enhance cyber skills and knowledge on addressing the latest threats. The AFP Command and Control, Computer, Communication Intelligence, Surveillance, Target Acquisition, and Reconnaissance, or the C4I STAR, is continuously progressing towards its completion under the Horizon 1 project funded under the AFP Modernization Program. Yesterday, I am pleased to have witnessed and presided over the capability demonstration and ceremonial activation of the AFP Joint Secure Radio System of the Western Mindanao Command, which was also attended by other AFP unit commanders who will be the end users of this new capability. Once implemented, the AFP C4I STAR system will provide the needed common operational picture and situational awareness through the integration of the various sensors operated and maintained by the major services. The C4I STAR infrastructures of the General Headquarters, Western Command, and the Eastern Command, including the railway station in Santo Tomas, Benguet, are also nearing completion. On the other hand, the AFP recognizes the increasing need to establish stronger defense diplomacy relations through security cooperation and engagement. In light of the volatility and complexity of the recent domestic and international security environments, the need to deepen and strengthen our relations with existing defense allies and like-minded nations is vital in order to explore more opportunities for capability and capacity building. The first major international engagement that I have participated in as the Chief of Staff AFP was the 2021 Chiefs of Defense Conference held virtually in Hawaii, which focused on common security concerns and exploration of the most promising opportunities for countries in the region to promote regional cooperation and inclusive security. Further, in order to enhance and strengthen the framework for defense and security cooperation between the United States and the Philippine military, the annual Mutual Defense Board Security Engagement Board meeting was virtually conducted last 24 September 2021. The board, which was co-chaired by yours truly and Admiral John C. Aquilino, U.S. Navy, the commander of the United States Indo-Pacific Command, catered on maritime security challenges and initiatives, enhanced defense cooperation agreement, locations and projects, opportunities related to mutual defense concept plan, information sharing and maritime domain awareness, Balikatan, resumption of AFP Japan Self-Defense Force, U.S. Indo-PACOM, trilateral joint staff talks, and activities for calendar year 2022. For our gains from international security or internal security operations, creation of the game-changer National Task Force to end the local communist armed conflict, which enhanced our whole-of-nation approach, was crucial in sustaining our gains against internal security threats. The AFP's active role in the NTF-LCAX programs resulted to 1,406 cleared barangays through the conduct of community support programs, which are soon to be recipients of the Barangay Development Program for calendar year 2022. Palakpakan po natin si NSA. Our intensified intelligence capabilities were likewise instrumental in launching of various counteraction operations that led to the neutralization of a total of 437 threat personalities, the most recent and significant of which is the neutralization of George Madlos Aka Oris, the commander of the New People's Army National Operations Command, the NPA spokesperson and member of the Central Committee, and of course, Salahuddin Hassan Aka Abu Salman or Abu Saif, the top leader of Dawla Islamiyah Hassan Group, or the DIHG, and overall Emir of DI Philippines. In support to the pronouncement made by our Commander-in-Chief, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, on the granting of rewards, the AFP was able to facilitate the processing and awarding of total of 37,250,000 pesos incentives to the deserving AFP units and individuals who were instrumental for the neutralization of high-value targets. Furthermore, the AFP continuously participates in planning workshops, conferences, and peace symposia of the Government of the Philippines Coordinating Committee on the Cessation of Hostilities and Ad Hoc Joint Action Group, the GPH, CCCH, and AJAG, in support to the government's peace and development agenda for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region or Administrative Region in Muslim Mindanao, Cordillera People's Liberation Army, and the NPA Rejectionist Group Kapatiran Community Defense Unit. As an offshoot of the AFP's submission of reports to the Commission on Human Rights of the Communist Terrorist Group's human rights and international humanitarian law violations throughout the years, a memorandum of understanding between Commission on the Human Rights and the Philippine Campaign to Ban Landmines was finalized, which aims for both parties to work on areas of advocacy, technical support, monitoring and reporting, verification missions, and policymaking towards banning of landmines. Likewise, the AFA Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law Reference Book 2021 was crafted to provide our personnel relevant information and reference materials on human rights and international humanitarian law, such as laws, treaties, and letter directives. As we continuously perform our mandate amidst the challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, the AFP likewise remained a dependable partner of the government in humanitarian assistance and disaster response operations, in particular, utilizing the unique capabilities of its Health Service Command. The Armed Forces of the Philippines was able to augment vital medical services to other military and civilian health facilities in administering vaccination, quarantine, and other medical treatment services. On the other hand, the major services similarly continue to augment security, transportation, and manpower support services to our government agencies in addressing the diverse needs of communities affected by the pandemic. Utilizing its air assets, the Philippine Air Force was instrumental in ensuring that remote places in the country have immediate access to vaccines. On a similar note, the Philippine Army and the Philippine Navy's disaster response units saved countless lives during the onslaught of the recent tropical storm Maring. On the recent material upgrades under the AFP modernization program, 2 projects were delivered. The Philippine Air Force Air Defense Surveillance Radar System amounting to 2,680,000,000 pesos, which will advance our airspace surveillance capability, and the Philippine Navy Multi-Purpose Attack Craft Combat System and capability upgrade amounting to 722 million pesos, which will surely enhance our littoral defense and maritime interdiction operations. A breakthrough in the AFP's research and development functions, the Naval Research and Technology Development Center took part in the monumental development of the Maya 3 and Maya 4 cube satellites led by the University of the Philippines Diliman Electrical and Electronics Engineering Institute. Through the sustained support for local space, technology, and applications, mastery, innovation, and advancement program funded by the Department of Science and Technology, the locally built Maya 3 and Maya 4 CubeSats were launched on 29 August 2021 to the International Space Station as part of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or NASA, SpaceX Commercial Resupply Mission 23. Notably, during my tenure, I also gave premium in properly managing the AFP's real estate assets across the country, accelerating efforts for infrastructure development, upgrading the capabilities of real estate offices, and in addressing their concerns related to real estate management. Under the DPWH, DND's Tatag ng Infrastruktura para sa Kapayapaan at Seguridad, or the TICAS program, a total of 168 projects in different AFP camps and military reservations were completed. 108 are ongoing, and 110 under the process of procurement and will soon be started. The completed projects situated inside our unified commands will soon provide more favorable working and living facilities for officers, enlisted personnel, and civilian human resource. On the other hand, in recognition of the vital role of our reserve force in national security and stability, it is necessary to strengthen its capability order to operationalize ready reserve units and clearly define the role of reservists during utilization or during mobilization. Our reservists have been and continue to be one of our most dependable assets in various humanitarian disaster response operations, lending the valuable time and expertise. They render selfless services all over the country in diverse capacities, particularly in providing medical services. On that note, continuous trainings and subject matter expert exchanges are conducted by the major service reserve units in order to further empower and ensure the prompt and effective response of our reserve force in various emergencies. With the exigencies posed by the pandemic, our personnel continue to be subjected to more vulnerable conditions as they perform their duties and responsibilities. It is on this light that I have placed utmost importance on the welfare and development of our personnel by giving them the best medical and health services that the AFP can provide in order to ensure their safety and those of their dependents during these trying times. Moreover, as we strengthen our role in the whole-of-nation approach, our successful collaborations with various stakeholders enabled us to sustain our gains in terms of peace and security. These close partnerships have indeed benefited the entire AFP as an organization, and of course, our individual personal livelihood projects intended for wounded personnel were inaugurated in order to provide them more opportunities for productivity. Similarly, donations from the US Indo-PACOM and from the Australian government augmented the capability of some of our military health facilities in terms of basic medical supplies and equipment. I am also pleased and honored to be part of the AFP's journey in achieving its highest trust and approval rating for the third quarter of this year, topping the survey at 67% among the rest of the government agencies. This figure undoubtedly is a clear demonstration of the AFP's continued pursuit of excellence and professionalism. Thank you very much for your trust. As a testament to the public's trust and confidence, the AFP was fortunate to be featured in the mainstream documentary, which focused on the organization's current priorities on both external and internal defense and the perspective or in the respective capabilities and competencies of its major services. Indeed, these overwhelming accomplishments and affirmation from the Filipino people truly make our sacrifices worth it. I am certain that all members of our highly esteemed organization shall remain steadfast and committed to their sworn duties of securing the people and protecting the state. With even the short time entrusted to me as the 56th Chief of Staff, I am confident that I have done my very best to help set the path of the AFP in finishing the fight. As my time in the active military service draws to a close, allow me to convey my most profound gratitude and sincere appreciation and pay tribute to everyone who made my journey in the service possible, meaningful, and truly memorable. To our Lord Almighty, I give back all the glory to you for continuously guiding me and lighting my path as I treaded difficult roads in the past and will now seek new adventures in the new chapter of my life. To our Commander-in-Chief, President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, my utmost gratitude to you, sir, for your confidence in my ability to lead the gallant members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. It has been my greatest honor and privilege to have served our country alongside you and our heroes. To the Secretary of National Defense, Secretary Darfin Negrillo Lorenzana, thank you, sir, for the guidance and wisdom which certainly helped me make the best decisions during my term. To the Vice Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Erickson R. Gloria, who's watching us online right now, to the Deputy Chief of Staff, Vice Admiral Erickson A. Kagawan, to all the members of the J staff, personnel and special staff, and the commanders and chiefs of the AFP, Wide Support and Separate Units, thank you very much for the unconditional support, commitment, and cooperation that you have demonstrated during my tenure as the Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines. It has been a pleasure to have led and served with you. I am also grateful to the officers, enlisted personnel, and civilian human resource of the Office of the Chief of Staff. Allow me to thank them, led by Colonel Harold Argamosa, Colonel Jacob Tadeus Obligado, and Major Antonio Bulao, and likewise to the Office of the SJS, led by Colonel Von Albert Semerhido. You have all selflessly and ably labored day in and day out to ensure that the requirements entailed during my tour of duty are managed promptly and efficiently. My utmost gratitude to all of you. Mabuhay kayo. To every soldier, airman, sailor, and marine, I am deeply grateful to have served with all of you. Your dedication to duty and heart for service are the driving forces that made all our accomplishments possible. It has indeed been a most fruitful and meaningful journey spent with you. To all our fallen comrades and those who have served before us, I pay tribute to your ultimate sacrifices and bravery that continues to fuel the spirit of patriotism among the current generation of Filipino soldiers. My snappiest salute to your great memories. To my mentors and former commanders, I thank you all for sharing your experience and wisdom with me from the start of my military career until this day that I am about to hang my uniform. Maraming salamat, sirs. To my mistas from the Philippine Military Academy class or Maringal class of 1988, I am always proud to be one amongst you. Thank you very much for the support and friendship that you and your families have given me and my family all these years. I look forward to spending more leisure time and light moments with you. Salamat, mga mista. To the newly posted Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Andres Castor Centino, I am comforted by the thought that I shall leave to your ward an exceptional force of competent, dedicated, and valiant individuals who all embody the core values of honor, service, and patriotism. By the way, I will hand over the recommended AFP policies and directives for review and revision. I have my full trust and confidence in your capability and wisdom as manifested by your numerous achievements in your previous units and past designations. Aside from being a proficient military commander, you are also known to motivate and inspire people through teamwork and camaraderie. I am certain that our armed forces will reach greater milestones in the coming days. Lastly, but surely not the least, I'm truly grateful to my family, my loving wife, Joy, my only daughter, Christine, my ever-supportive parents, Jose Sr. and Sanen, and siblings Joy, Judith, James, Jonathan, and Jigs, puro J, who have been my greatest source of strength, inspiration, and happiness. Thank you for the unconditional love and support, and for accepting and appreciating the sacrifices that I had to do as I fulfill my sworn duty to flag and people. I hope I made all of you proud. I am most eager to start new adventures and memories with you. It has indeed been an interesting and meaningful journey for me. Sa pagtatapos ng aking serbisyo sa Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas, ako ay nanunumpa na muli na ipagpapatuloy ang paglilingkod sa ating inang bayan at sa ibang pamamaraan. Sapagkat kagaya ng binigkas ni Gat Andres Bonifacio, wala nang hihigit pa sa pag-ibig sa tinubuang lupa. Sa kabila ng aking mataas na katungkulan, ako ay nananatiling isang ordinaryong Pilipinong binigyan ng pagkakataong magsilbi, kahanay ng mga bayani ng ating lahi. Isang napakalaking karangalan ang mapabunuan ang sandatahang lakas ng Pilipinas. Maraming salamat sa pagkakataong maging isang sundalong Pilipino at mapaglingkuran ang ating inang bayan. Mabuhay ang sandatahang lakas ng Pilipinas, mabuhay ang bayan ng mga bayani, mabuhay ang Pilipinas nating mahal. Maraming salamat po.
Well, thank you very much to the 56th Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, General Jose Kalingasan Faustino, Jr.
At this point, the new Chief of Staff, Armed Forces of the Philippines, Lieutenant General Andres C. Centino, will introduce the presiding officer.
Ladies and gentlemen, let us please welcome the officer in charge, Undersecretary for Defense Operations, Department of National Defense, Undersecretary Cesar Badong-Llano.
Please take your seats. Thank you. Thank you, General Andy. Senior officials of the government, Secretary Esperon, Secretary Galvez, Undersecretary Tabaquero, and Philippine Coconut Authority Administrator Madrigal, to our two principals, Generals Boy Faustino and General Andy Centino, and their very proud families, as well as personal guests. To our former chiefs of staff, of course, we have Secretary Esperon and Secretary Galvez, and of course, General Librado and General Llano. To the most senior among us, senior citizens, General Santos. Thank you, sir, for coming over. Fellow DND officials present, to the Defense and Armed Forces Attaches present, to our major service commanders or their representatives, to Superintendent of PMA, Philippine Marine Commandant, to our unified commanders, and of course to our IG, General Gakal, members or proud members of Class 88 and their spouses. Just too unlucky that Class 88 will no longer have their third chief of staff. Mahaba kasi yung term, matagal pa mag-retire si But anyway, to the RTF, LCAC, and ELAC, main actors in Maguindanao and Sultan Kudarat, we have Lieutenant Colonels and Governors Teng Mangudadato and Bay Mariam. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Other officers of the armed forces, AFP Command Sergeant Major, representative from the Bureau of Fire, soldiers, airmen, and sailors deployed out there in the field and in the seas, keeping our nation and people safe. To those who are attending online, other esteemed guests, good afternoon. As Defense Undersecretary for Capability Assessment and Development, allow me to convey the congratulations of our Defense Chief, Secretary Delphine Lorenzana, to the two equally great men of the hour, General Jose Kalingasan Faustino, Jr., and Lieutenant General Andres Centino for having reached the pinnacle of their military career. To General Faustino, the One Defense Team thanks you for your outstanding service and immeasurable sacrifices to the armed forces and to our country. Enjoy the civilian life that awaits you. To our 57th AFP Chief of Staff, General Centino, congratulations on your well-deserved appointment. Rest assured that the Department of National Defense will continue to support you as you fulfill your role of leading a highly professional workforce. Maraming salamat. Mabuhay ang sandatahang lakas ng Pilipinas at ang sambayanang Pilipino. Moving on, allow me to perform my most important task of introducing our guest of honor and speaker. Mga magigiting na kawal at minamahal kong kababayan, ang Pangulo ng Republika ng Pilipinas at pangkalahatang pinuno ng sandatahang lakas, Rodrigo Roa Duterte.
My warmest greetings to General Jose C. Faustino, Jr. as you hold your retirement ceremony. I thank you for your remarkable service to our people and nation. I also pray that your good health. I also pray for your good health so that you may be able to spend more quality and precious moments with your family in the years ahead. Mabuhay ka, and I wish you all the best to the Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Well, thank you very much to President Rodrigo Roa Duterte, President of the Philippines. Well, meantime, our guests may remain seated as we'll be having the photo opportunity. We'll start off with our principals, together with the presiding officer, Undersecretary Llano. To our guests, please remain in your respective seats. Thank you, sirs. We'll start off now with our guests at the center.
We should all move towards our goal of winning the peace and defending our country despite the odds. I now urge Team AFP to renew the commitment with me to serve with honor, service, and patriotism. We will and we must place our national interest over self-interest.